Okay, I'll call the City Council workshop back in order. And next item on the agenda is capital improvements. I think Mr. Lasher is going to lead that discussion.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. As Ted pointed out, Bel Aire is just expanding at the seams. We're growing. What's exciting and fun about it and challenging at the same time is there's new opportunities, there's new challenges that we have to face, and it's also important that we look down the road now. I can remember 10 years ago when we were putting budgets together, we were wondering if we could replace a mower. And we had 200,000 we were hoping we could put towards streets. And here we are 10 years later, and we're actually able to purchase new equipment that we need that we've never had. It's not even a replacement. It's something that we need and can replace. We're spending $1.2 million on road improvements this year, just a complete opposite. But there's still, when we talk about CIP, that's not just about streets or police cars. That includes bigger projects. And there's two that we're struggling with now that I want to discuss with you, put on your radar, and be thinking about. So the first one's our Public Works facility. It's located on Woodlawn, just north of railroad tracks. You probably drove by it and never realized it's there. Because as you drive by, you see this building here, which is actually where the Wichita water hits our water system, and so that's kind of a pump house basically. And then there's a gate, and that's all you see. But the city owns about 7 acres back there. On the north, it's residential. On the south, it's commercial. Building's 32 years old. It's about 7,200 square feet. It's got 2 offices, small offices. There's a little break room in there. There's 1 restroom. There's 11 staff working out of there. And the current value is about $700,000 if we were to sell that today. Parking's an issue. They do have some loft storage in there, which is up above here. You can see it's pretty full. They try to get their equipment in to keep it protected. That's fun, getting things in and out. They also use it as a work area, so they got to get the trucks out before they can work on anything. They put storage along the sides. We do have an outside storage area where we built a few years back. We were able to put some more equipment in. This is the salt and sand area. Which is not the best situation because you can see it starts running out. KDHE doesn't like that. But that's our salt sand storage. We've got some other outside storage for pipes and sands and that kind of stuff. You can see we still can't get all of our equipment in. We've got graders sitting out, another dump truck sitting outside. We did set aside 2 lots over in the Sunflower Commerce Park specifically for expansion. These 2 lots are total 13 acres. It's zoned industrial. All the utilities are there. So it's double the size of what we have now. We just kind of looked at what could we put on there, a new shop facility, a building for inside storage of equipment. There's a brine tank, which is something we have talked about using. It's getting pretty common now for ice events. Actual salt building. They like to have a tree farm where they grow trees and then put them around town and things like that. So there's a lot more room there. And then also a new public works facility. What we're looking at is about 15,000 square foot is what we really need. That's double the size of what we've got now. Men's and women's locker, shower rooms. Right now we only have 1 restroom and there's no shower or locker rooms there. 5 offices for expansion, a break training room. Of course, a welding and metal fab area. You know, there's issues when you're welding with other people around. Storm shelter. They don't have a storm shelter. This would have an actual storm shelter for them, a lift bay, a wash bay, tool area. You know, you look through those pictures and you saw how cramped they are currently. Some type of outside a building that we could store vehicles in. Obviously, this is way too big. You can see they've got a grader in there and they got plenty of room. So we're not looking at this side, but something like this where we can store equipment. So the question that we have and what you've had is, what's it cost to design a shop? How much does it cost to build? And are there funds available? So we didn't know question 2 and 3, but that's how we planned for expansion. What's it going to cost to build a new facility? We have no idea. So what I did was I sent out RFPs to find out, okay, what would it cost to design it and give us a cost? You can see the prices came in all over the place. Obviously, some of them are busier than others. But the interesting thing was there's the 3 that were under $50,000. There's 3 architectural firms, well-known firms, that could actually design it and give us a good, pretty solid estimate on what it would cost to build this type of facility. Again, this is not a complete design where we would go out for bid. The idea is that we need a good firm number to plan for, knowing that this may not be built for 5 years or 10 years, and there may be some changes that we'd want to make. So we wouldn't take it all the way to design and it's ready to construct. The other issue is City Hall. Building's 20 years old, but our needs have changed. The storm shelter safe room is a big issue for us. It's located in the police department, and I'll talk a little bit about that. We've got no storage. We're in fact renting a storage unit to keep some some office equipment and some things like that we may need. We've got the community room downstairs, but it has access really to all of City Hall. So even though there may be an event here, people could walk upstairs. Yes, they can't get in here, but they can walk around upstairs. They can walk all along the foyer downstairs. We need more space for community events. Court is getting pretty busy. The other alternative would be add more court dates. And then we need a more accessible storm room that's larger. So right now, our current safe room is located in the police department. It's about 320 square feet. It'll hold 30 people. As I said, times have changed over the last 20 years. So currently, to get into this area of the police department, you need to have a background check. So there's very few of us that have been background checked. So theoretically, most of our staff couldn't even go in here. Now, if this tornado is bearing down on us, I'm not going to probably enforce that, but that's an issue that we're dealing with. Our current community room is downstairs. You've all been in it. It's about 1,700 square feet. It'll hold 125 people. We're running about 100 at court. And then you add in some police officers and the judge and things. So we're about at capacity, 125. It does rent 20 times a year on average is the community can rent it. And then, of course, we use it for community events. Our current council chambers, which is where we're located now, is about 1,400 square feet to hold 50 people. We have planning commission and city council meetings, and it's been full before. I think those of you that's been on the council have seen it full. So my proposal is we look at building a new building that's next to City Hall. Basically, it would be a storm shelter and community room. So we've got our entire campus where City Hall sits, and there's plenty of room for expansion. But maybe put something back here, really pretty simple of a building. It would be a community room and storm shelter. The nice thing about it is it has no access to City Hall at that point. So it's a separate standalone building. Somebody wanted to rent it, at court there, they would have no access to the City Hall itself. We could hold community events there, meetings, you could still rent it. We have a full kitchen right now. If you've been downstairs, there's a little kitchenette, and it's not real conducive to having food and things like that for rentals or meetings that we have. We have an office in there for the judge. That's important because they do what do they call that? Whatever, where they don't bring the prisoners out here. They call down to the jail. So the judge has two-way communication at the jail. Some storage AV room, hold about 250 people. So it'd be double the size of what we've got now. The big issue with this facility specifically, and maybe even the public works facility, is there's a lot of government money out there, a lot of ARPA money available. And I think there's some opportunities to get part or all of this paid for. The question that we go back to is what's it cost? How much do I ask for? I've already done some initial discussions with Sedgwick County about some opportunities, and they're open to that. Then the next question is, okay, what do we do with the current spaces that we have? Well, right now, council chambers, we'd look at turning this into a new meeting room. We're running short on meeting space for meetings. Maybe a couple new offices, some storage. The AV room would probably become storage. The community room downstairs, we'd move the council chambers down there. So we'd go from 50, which is what capacity you have up here, to 125. And then the kitchen, judge's office that's down there would become AV and executive session room. So we'd do some changes here because of the new building. So those same companies I contacted about an RFP for design of this gave me some costs, and you can see again they're pretty much all over the place. But there's four under 66,000 to again design the facility and then look at what type of renovations would occur here at City Hall. And again, the reason that we'd want to do this is to determine what the cost would be, and then where could we possibly get some funds to do this. So my request to you is, we've already done the RFP, so we know what the design cost would be. And so what I would like to see is us set aside about $130,000 of our ARPA funds to select two firms to go to actually design these and give us the amounts that we need, or the dollar amounts that we can budget for, and go search for funding. Most of the ARPA, the federal dollars, have got to be spent by, is it 2024? So if we're going to do this and they're giving money away, we've got to get on it in the next couple of years to get any of that extra funding. So what I would propose is, we already have the RFPs in there. We could have some staff interview the 3 to 5 firms, again, keeping it under that total of 130,000. Then we'd make a recommendation to the council. And then the firms would each design, and it's obviously going to be different firms for each building because the prices were different. And then they would design and then create the cost estimates. And then with those cost estimates, then as we're looking at future budgets, you would know how much those facilities are going to cost and whether we should start saving some money now and how much, or are we going to look at maybe doing a bond to pay for some of those? And in the meantime, staff would start working on these funding opportunities. We would know what the costs are, and then we would start going after maybe some federal money and some partnerships in different aspects of these. So that's on your questionnaire, is what do you think about that? Would you support that? And again, this is not constructing anything. All it is coming up with designs that would give us good numbers to budget / go after money for.
Did you allocate enough parking for the additional people that would be on campus?
Yeah, that's a question that they would have to look at, some parking space.
And how much space would be left over in this, 8 acres after all of that?
Yeah. Yeah, and that's something that they would have to look at as well. When we get to, I don't have it on this section, but when we get to talking about the Central Park lots, I've got a design that shows exactly what's supposed to be on City Hall, and there's several buildings that are supposed to be located or that were planned to be located on this lot. So we would add in one of those, and there'd still be room for other buildings.
Well, the picture you had filled up more than what was allocated in that original 20-year ago plan. So
Yeah. Yeah. So any questions?
So the only thing you have right now is just some RFPs to create a design.
Yeah, yeah. And, you know, to go farther, and because my thought process was, you know, for you to budget for down the road, you know, these 5-10 year projects, you got to have a number. The other part is if I'm going to talk to the county and the state on, is there some funds available to help pay for some of these? Again, the building that we're looking at is primarily a storm shelter. So that's a big safety aspect piece of it. You know, we got to know how much to ask for. And
So do you have any ballpark estimates what these buildings would cost?
no, I don't. And that's the issue is I have no idea. And again, the reason that the lower prices are because I told them that what we need is what's it going to look like? You know, can we get these things in them that we're needing? And what's a strong ballpark to answer your question, Mayor? But knowing that chances are we're not going to build it next month. It could be in a year, it could be in 5 years. And so we don't need plans that are ready to bid because things may change. Or as we're looking at getting federal funding, there may be some requirements that they say, well, you need to do this or that to increase your grant opportunities. So we could tweak it a little bit.
Have you given any consideration to housing police cars?
So interestingly enough, I started out as a storm shelter and police garage. And so the idea was let's put the basement, you know, because everybody has basements in their house. And you always hear when you're building a house that, oh, that's the cheapest part of your house is the basement. And, you know, you can double your square foot because you put a basement down. So I thought, well, let's build a basement that'll house 200 people, and then we'll put a garage on top of it. And then the first engineering company I met with, they said, do you understand this is basically, well, they said, what's your issue? And I said, well, you know, the storm shelter is our biggest issue. And then our community room is running out of space, but storm shelter, that's the thing. And they said, well, the storm shelter you're building with the garage on top is double of what you could build a standalone storm shelter for. And I said, oh, and they said, well, because you're going to want your garage to match City Hall. So you're going to probably want it brick, aren't you? And it's like, well, you'd probably like it to match. You don't want a steel building out there. And then of course the other thing is, you know, is that what's the real purpose that we're doing this for? Is it police storage? And, you know, for 20 some years we've been here, we've never had them garaged. And so then I shifted to, okay, well, our true need is the storm shelter. And so that's why the actual garages went away, because the storm shelter, which is our major issue, is half the price. And yet we can also then give us some more space in City Hall. And if we wanted to look at protecting police cars, there's other ways that we could do it that would be much more affordable.
Okay, thank you.
So Ty, this is basically what would essentially be just a conceptual design and range of magnitude budget. Like it would be really rough.
Yeah. Well, I told them that I wanted it tight enough so that if council said, let's do this, and then we start getting bids and it comes in double, I said, that'll never work. You've got to get it designed to the point where you're very comfortable with, if we went out for a bid, that we're going to be very close. And that's, they all understood that. So yeah, it shouldn't be a ballpark. It should be pretty close.
What percentage did you ask for? Like plus or minus what percentage?
I didn't ask. I mean, I didn't say a specific within 10% or 5%
okay.
or whatever. Now I did tell them that we understand, and that's part of what they're to do, is to build in a creep. So knowing that, you know, if you build it today, based on everything we know, it's $1 million. And if you build it in 5 years, based on everything we know, it's $1.5 million or whatever. So that, again, if we're thinking, you know, the public works facility is 10 years down the road, what's it going to cost in 10 years?
Yeah, a lot of times on that, when they're at the conceptual stage, it can be as high as 20 to 30%. Like they'll really cover their butt, so to speak, on that early of a design. Anyway, one other question I had was, there's probably some public information we can dig out. I'm thinking Park City's facility they built 7-8 years ago. We can probably get an idea of what the range of magnitude could be just by digging some public records. But I guess I'm in favor of the definitely getting these consideration. The thing I would ask too is if these firms that you've talked with, if there was any interest in doing both, could you essentially shortlist, 3, and then kind of interview them individually for each project, and then maybe even for a combined proposal. If they were going to put their folks on estimating and designing, they may be more interested in it if given the opportunity to compete for an overall competition for the two. Just some thoughts.
It's a good question.
Yep.
What else would the ARPA funds be used for if we didn't use the set aside for this?
Well, and that's, we don't know yet. And we're going to talk a little bit about that, some opportunities for ARPA funds down the road as well. So yeah, we've got a lot of ideas. Unfortunately, I think we're going to run out of money before we get all of our ideas done. But some matching street funds probably.
I mean, that's my concern. If you do this, what's the trade-off?
Yeah, and again, that's the tough thing about, you're looking, are you going to look at fixing something today? You're going to think about what we need to be doing in the next 5 years, 10 years. That's the fun of the CIP part of it, is the capital improvements. Is are we going to just focus on today? Are we going to focus on tomorrow, 5 years, 10 years? Those are all your thoughts.
So have we had any discussion with Sedgwick County about doing some sort of a partnership facility out here? They're running out of room. They're going to go and rent a bunch of space in the Ruffin building, but that's for 2 years. And after that, they got to find some other place to go. And maybe they'd be interested in some sort of a satellite office that we could do a combined project with. I'm just throwing that out as something, if we had any discussion with them about that.
That's a good point. I've had some preliminary discussions, and if you saw, one of the thoughts was, as an office, is for the judge and maybe Sedgwick County sheriff, because there's a northeast beat for Sedgwick County. Mm-hmm. And instead of going all the way down to the courthouse or wherever they're going to be at, mm-hmm. Maybe they would like a satellite office up here. And then the other piece of it is, if it's a storm shelter, a lot of times 911, and I know they've done it in other locations, is they look for a satellite in case, of course, it's supposed to be non-destructive, their 911 emergency center. But if for some reason they needed a different location to operate out of for some reason, they could possibly have some interest. Those two things I've talked to the county about, and they said, yes, we're interested. Now, broaching them about satellite office for even other things, I think that's another question to ask them. But the two small pieces that I asked about, which is an office and maybe a backup, they were interested in that.
I also think that the storm shelter, we should see if there's some FEMA funding for that, because I think that's important. I mean, that may not have anything to do with any of these other bills that the Congress has put out there, but FEMA really does support storm shelters.
Right. Yep.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Smith.
just for clarity, I think that you were asserting that there might be some sort of matching funds for the additional facility that would be on campus here at City Hall. That wouldn't be the case for the Public Works facility. Am I understanding that correctly?
I don't know. My guess is probably not, but I don't know. And again, it goes back to, with both facilities, is it's difficult to go say, hey, do you have any money for a public works facility? And they say, well, how much do you need? And I have no idea if it's $1 million or 20 million. And then the other piece of it is when you apply for money, they want to see what it looks like. That's, again, that's what part of this is conceptual drawings and plans and what all is included in there, other than saying, well, it's $1 million storm shelter and 5,000 square feet. And that's just the hard part about trying to figure out what to go after, not knowing really any details other than a concept that I've thought of.
Well, I appreciate that clarification, and I really like the ideas. I mean, I think those are really innovative ideas, and I think they're really cool. I think the struggle for me is going to be thinking about how to prioritize those all of the other things that we've talked about. The really high demand for a focus on infrastructure and streets. I mean, it's overwhelming in the community, the demand for that, and quite frankly and bluntly, I haven't heard any demand for this stuff, but I do recognize the need, from a staff perspective as well. So I think that's going to be the struggle, is the priority there. And for me, it may not be this year.
It's certainly going to be a lot cheaper to add court dates than to build a new courtroom.
Yeah, it is. And of course, again, it's just like a lot of things we do is we haven't needed a storm shelter yet. But my fear is that we're having court and there's a tornado and we're saying, up, get out, you can't stay here. And we have people dead because we didn't do anything, And again, what's the chance of that? 1%, 0.5%? I don't know. But, there's things that keep me up at night, and that's one of them. And so I'm just doing my part and, getting you to think about things.
So how much leeway is the designer's going to have on siting the building? Because like I said, we got to plan for parking too, not just a building. And does this mean that we may need a parking garage? Because that building design you showed took up half of what's available in the.
So yeah, I mean, that's part of it is where would it go? Would it go right out here? Would it go off to the side? How big is it? How much of it does it use? That kind of stuff. That's something that we need their help with.
Well, yeah, that's got to be the first question they answer. They can't design a whole building and then find out we can't support the building.
Yep.
And that needs to be aesthetically fit with the current architecture of this building so that it doesn't look like, well, we're just putting hodgepodge pieces here and there.
Exactly.
That doesn't present the city well.
Yeah, I mean, I would trust these firms. They're all professionals to site evaluate and determine the parking needs. I think that's definitely something that we'd be hiring them to do. I don't think we need to worry about the nuts and bolts of that right now.
I think we do a little bit because it lets us know what we can plan for the rest of the site.
Well, and I kind of agree with Ty. This is a 5 to 10 year plan. So I think the idea that this is going to happen this year or next year is definitely not the case. I think this is something that, like you said, you really have to balance, because every year we need to be spending money on all sorts of CIP stuff, but this is definitely more long range probably.
Right. But there are other things that may want to be cited on this same piece of property. So we can't just do it in a void. We got to consider other things that might happen.
Sanford, did you have something?
Just one question I had on the Public Works building. Just a general question. I don't know enough about the elements and our extreme temperature. Are we really shortening the life of this equipment by storing it outside? I mean, I know it's more ideal if you can put it inside, but do you have any idea on that?
Yeah, I don't know that it's shortening it by half or anything like that. I do know that, you get more rust because things are sitting outside, especially some of the things that we have because they've got dirt on them and, they try to wash them and clean them and stuff. But the conditions they're using them for is tougher than my truck or your truck or something like that. So
It's really hard on things you can't see, like wiring. And like you said,
yeah.
dirt underneath causes rust if they can't clean it out.
And
Which reminds me of the other question. How much room do we have left on the site by the railroad track?
we probably have 3 acres left. The problem is it's tough to access and there's trees and stuff that have to be taken out and things. It's not well. Okay, so here, John, here's your one question. I think maybe you thought this was this here's the building right here. It's not this whole area.
Okay,
It's
I
that
can't see
building
good
there.
enough to know that.
Yeah. So when you said it takes that, which, if you look at this whole thing, I don't know what this is actually the building is what they're looking, because it's smaller than City Hall because, if the community room is, I don't remember how many square feet and it held 125, this is double. So, so the community room's 1,700. So let's say this new facility would probably be 4,000 square feet, something like that.
Pretty small.
Yeah, it's not huge by any means. So,
We still need parking for a couple of hundred people.
yep, maybe we might.
Ty,
use
my guess is that says site impact. That gray or light white is kind of disturbance, areas of disturbance is kind of what they're
Gotcha.
expecting. Is my guess, but there's codes they'll have to follow to determine the number of parking stalls and
Yep.
all that good stuff. And
So,
I
is there any more questions?
John, you'd asked about how much land was left on the public works side. I was kind of wondering probably something similar. And, if we're 10 years out on this new public works building, which my guess is the storm shelter is going to probably come first because I think there's a more compelling case for that. We probably are. Have we ever considered a more shorter term option of like another Morton building on the public works facility with maybe a bathroom and something pretty low cost that would improve the situation, add some value to the property, and maybe tide us over?
You could probably get 2 bathrooms in a building there and move a lot of your equipment inside and get your salt and sand undercover without spending, without spending near what we'd spend on building all new facility.
I actually know a company in town that can do a repurposed shipping container for $50,000. They'll provide you with 2 restrooms and 2 offices. Okay, so ballpark number. That's not.
Yeah. And again, I
quote.
think that's the vision that the council has to, or you just want to keep filling this up with buildings and shrinking what you have. This is actually the area here. So,
Can we
and-
tie into that Edgemore Street where it curves?
Yeah,
That is
it
Edgemore,
does.
isn't it?
We did.
Uh-huh. There's a second entrance there.
There's an
There's a
entrance there.
gravel road.
Yeah.
Okay, well then we have drive-through. It'd make it easy for trucks to dump stuff. And
Yep.
if we kept that side, we won't have drive-through at the other side. They'd have to turn around and come back out.
Yeah.
I mean, in the long run, this may be a great place to keep storing rock and other things.
Yeah, well, like I said, I could visit with the staff, see what what the issues would be about adding on and things like that. Again, it's just a vision of, do you want to stay here in the middle of town, 7 acres, eventually going to run out, and do you want to just keep investing in this? Again, it's just a thought.
I don't know that everything has to be in one location, I guess is my thought. I can see the new building with places for staff that's there all the time and that having a tornado shelter.
Will
You
you
can do the
remind?
tree farm now.
Yeah,
What's
there's
that?
nothing stopping you from the tree farm.
Would you remind me about the dates for when these projects? Was it 2024? What is the date?
Yeah,
Again.
2024 is when everybody has to have their money spent, their ARPA government funds spent.
That's just one program.
Just one.
There's several programs out there, but that one, yeah. And we have 1.3 million, is that correct?
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Smith?
Ted, can you remind us? I know at one point I think you or Ty provided us a list of all the possible projects and uses for ARPA funds, and I think that total was many millions of dollars.
Yeah.
What was that total of possible projects?
Yeah, we haven't, we had that workshop before they kind of lifted or allowed a $10 million exemption. The one thing I'm working through right now is, well as the budget and supporting my staff. They did allow a $10 million exemption. So anything under $10 million, we can pretty much use. A lot of the restrictions are lifted. So if we wanted to do a street or something like that, we could do it. But they didn't lift the federal procurement guidelines that you must follow. So right now I'm going to be working on conflict of interest policies and a lot of those type of things so that we're ready when we do want that project. So again, it is, yes, it's free money, but yes, it takes a little time to get all your ducks in a row. And that'll be a whole workshop where we want to design what we want to do with these. But there's a lot of possibilities with this money. So we need to be throwing out as much as we can if we want to take advantage of that in that area.
And I think the key is what we're trying to do is leverage in dollars. So we've got 1.2 million. Can we leverage 130,000 to get 3 million to build a new facility? Can we leverage, that 1.2 million to get $10 million worth of street improvements made? That's kind of what the ideas we're throwing out is, and CIP is, these are all of our problems or our challenges. This is what it's going to cost to leverage to maybe get some of that money.
And I think
so
the hard part is we're going to the proposal is spend $130,000 for a chance at getting some extra money. There's nothing guaranteed there. And we may actually get nothing for that $130,000 other than some really good design plans that maybe someday we might have some extra money to go pay for ourselves.
I would agree a little bit with what you said, Justin, but the second part is we're going to spend the money to have conceptual design and budget done at some point. So the question for us as a council is prioritizing. What do we really need to spend the money on? And maybe public works facility is it, or maybe it's not. And maybe a community center and storm shelter is it, maybe it's not. And maybe that's just what we got to get to is where does that fit with the overall priority?
Yeah,
Only
it
have so
doesn't
much
have to
money.
be all. It doesn't have to be in both. It could be one.
Right.
Again, it's your thoughts. So to keep us on track, another CIP that you do need to consider.
Go.
Oh,
The council
yes.
member has a question.
Yes.
Ms. Amber.
I hit it a while back.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Okay. So the next thing that you will need to make a decision on is we talk about the gravel streets. So for the new council members, I'm going to try to briefly go over this to bring you up to where we're at today. And maybe you've seen this if you watched some of our past council meetings, but we have 3 areas in Bel Aire that have gravel roads still. Everything else is paved. Arthur Heights is at 45th and Woodlawn. It's platted in 53. It's got 24 lots. Cozy Homes was platted in 1965, 10 lots, and that's behind Treetop. And then Aurora Park, which is at Oliver and 37th Street, it's platted in 1952. It's got 102 lots in that area. So over the last 2 years, the council that's been here for that 2-year period have received numerous complaints about dust, drainage issues, gravel maintenance, and all 3. So the council looked at ideas, talked about ideas with citizens. One was dust treatments. It's a year-by-year solution. There's a cost to that. We could fix the drainage, which should take care of the streets because some of the problem was the drainage was going across the streets and eating the streets out. That's about 1.5 million. Or you could fix it all, for about 4.5 million. And of course, that's a long-term solving of the issue. So the council members that have been here over the last 3 years felt that the best solution was to pave the roads. So because you address the dust, you address the drainage, gravel streets are eliminated, so the maintenance is gone, long-term solution. So the question is, who pays and how much? So we've gotten estimates from PEC, and they did some preliminary studies on what needs to be done. The total is about 4.5 million for all 3 areas. If those were to be spread special assessments, which is what we do to all the new subdivisions, you're looking at about $1,900 per lot per year for 20 years. Discussion also centered around that the city at large could pay for the drainage improvements, which total about $575,000 in total, or $35,000 per year if we were to take on debt service for 20 years. And by doing that, the specials would drop to around $1,700 per lot. Just as a point of interest, of all 3 lots, the city brings in about $70,000 per year. So if you were to budget $35,000 for drainage improvements, about half of the taxes coming in would cover that special or that extra cost. So the question that we need answered, or consensus tonight to actually put on the agenda next Tuesday, is should the city at large pay for drainage improvements in each subdivision, about $575,000? Consensus was yes, but we have several new council members. So, Mayor?
So one of the issues here is we drafted this letter, and was it Garver that put the data together?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And Garver put all the data together for the different lots and all that. But it occurred to me that we would be remiss to put out a letter like that to the citizens when this body has never authorized spending $575,000. So, and I think my proposal was 700,000. Somehow it got reduced to 575. But I think the difference is that I was looking at projected maintenance reduction cost to us, and this doesn't do that.
Right,
but
right.
I'm okay either way. But I do believe that before we can send those letters out, this body needs to say, yeah, we're willing to do that if the citizens are willing to sign up for those, to pay the rest of the money. Without doing that, we've just bound the council with the council making a commitment to do it. So.
Well, that's a key statement, is the if, because that 570,000 was as part of the total project.
Right.
So we can't do just the drainage improvements for that money.
Right.
So I'm okay with approving it as long as it's conditional on the paving of the roads. And 700,000 doesn't bother me any more than 575 right now.
So I do believe it needs to be broke out to each division, though. I don't think we
Yes.
can just say blanket that, because I think because if one says, yeah, we're going to pay for it, and the other one says, no, we're not, then how are you going to split it out? You need to say that up front.
Yes.
So you don't
Yeah.
come back later and say,
Right.
what are we doing?
Yes, and there's so now that you've answered that question, the next question would be, do we want to pay cash or the bonded over 25 years? You don't have to make that decision now, but that's something we'll have to talk about. What the mayor's getting to is there's 3 different areas, and the cost for the drainage improvements are different because of the
Different issues.
grades and all that kind of stuff. The question is, should it be the same percentage for all 3? Should it be different percentages? We probably would want to do a not to exceed amount. This is some language down here that other cities have used. They've done the same thing. They've paid a certain percent or whatever. So we can put that in. So what the mayor was talking about is Aurora Park. That's the cost, about 13% of the overall cost, 47th and Hillside. You can see it's different, 9%. And Cozy Drive is more because it's flat and they have to make some inlets and some changes like that. So it's about 20%. So that comes up with your total. And that 13% is the overall aggregate. So as the mayor was kind of getting to, would you want to do 13% to not exceed each one, or just specifically look at this each one and that's the amount you would do?
I think we should look at we should use the top three.
Okay.
And then we should throw a percentage in that we were talking about going up to 700,000, but a percentage in for reduced cost and maintenance.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I think the objective was to recognize that the city's responsible for drainage in those areas, and it would cost, I think it'll cost the city more or less in the different areas if we were to just go do the drainage improvements. And so making the actual contribution reflect that cost makes sense to me.
Okay.
And I'm also okay with including the decreased maintenance.
So just do a percentage increase of each of those based upon what the spread of 700,000 would be.
Okay. Okay. Well, that was easy enough.
What would, one question though. So
Yes.
say one of these subdivisions does refuse to pay for the paving, because that's what we're talking about, right? The paving would be special assessments. What would we do with the difference? Would we spread it back across the other two, or would we put it into the general fund? What would our proposal be for that?
The way that we came
We
up
would just
with
lower
those
our
numbers,
cost.
the way that we came up with those numbers was we hired an engineering firm, I think it was Garver, to actually study the drainage of all those three areas
Yeah.
and tell us what the cost to bring those up to standard would be, because we know that the city has deferred doing maintenance of those for a long time.
Right.
And so these numbers came from that study and said, this is what it would cost to do it in these different areas.
Sure.
So if one area says, no, we're not going to pave, then that money
That cost goes
would
away.
not go for that. We'd probably start looking at how are we going to fix the drainage in that area. Now, the problem with that is, and of course, I think, and I can't remember if we were very specific in the letter about it, but the issue that I think we really need to emphasize with them, if we fix the drainage next week, it's going to have a problem again if you don't pave it, because rain just does that to you. Okay. And so it'll be a constant maintenance issue that we'd still have to incur. That's why, to Mr. Welch's point about increasing the amount, because we would avoid
Right.
future maintenance on those ditches if we did get them paved,
Makes sense.
the roads paved. I mean, not the ditches.
And so how does it work? Is it just a simple majority of residents in each area that vote yes or no for the paving?
It's a successful majority of the property owners.
Okay,
It's on up to the residents, it's up to the property owners. They have to pay the tax.
sure.
51%. All right. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Ted. He's going to talk about land bank funds.
Put a handout on everybody's, and I also posted to the agenda as well. We did sell a lot of land, and looks like we'll have around $5 million in proceeds at the end of this year, or we currently do have $5 million in proceeds. So what this does, and I'll help you read it a little bit. On the far left, you'll see the original bonds. That's our current bond schedule. It's a flat bond schedule, and it's about $1.2 million a year. If you go to the right on the blue, where it says $5 million redemption, this would be if we triggered inside our bond provision, we have a redemption. You can call it a rider, where it says we can just throw $5 million on our debt. And what this does is changes our debt service schedule to the left side. So on year 2023, it goes to about $1 million, saving $100,000 and so on. So you go all the way down. What this does is it takes the last 4 years, pretty much 5 years, because it cuts the other, and removes it. So our land debt would be paid off in 2030. with a total savings of $6 million. The other three proposals would be a little different. The other three proposals, what I would essentially do is create you call it an escrow, you can call it a proceeds fund. And I would deposit that $5 million in the proceeds fund. State statute requires me, and I think for good reason, they don't let cities get really risky with their idle fund investing. So we average conservatively about 3% over the next 14 years. So what we're doing is making money on top of using that proceeds fund to supplement our general fund transfer to make the payment. So that's what you're seeing on a proceeds fund at level. We spread $5 million, taking down what was a $1.2 million a year payment to around $550,000 or $650,000 a year. So what that does is saves money in the general fund on the right side to the tune of about $500,000 a year. And we retire the debt at the same level of 2034 as were original. The red debt service schedule is the same philosophy. We create the proceeds fund and then we supplement our general fund transfer, but it's a stair-step fund progression. What this allows us to do is in the first year, maybe we only save $200,000, but in year two, we save $300,000, then $350,000. So what it's doing over time, as you can see on the bottom side, is it's slowly going down until the out years, we're only paying $400,000. What this does is allows the mill levy to slowly reflect, just a little different debt service structure that eases the payments versus, having a huge downward movement in our transfers. And the last one probably wouldn't be my best one, but I included it because, hey, if you want to go crazy and make no payments for the first 5 years, that's what that will do. You'll see each of them have kind of different savings. Around $6 million seems to be the first three options. And then the ones, if we really wanted to essentially make no payment out of the general and let the proceeds just pay the first 5 years, the next 5 years, we're only save about $5.4 million. Probably a lot of questions, but I'll leave it at that and see what you guys think.
What's our current interest rate on the bonds?
Sub 2%.
And you think you can invest at 3%?
That's what our financial advisor, Adam Pope, said, because I said, hey, what would be a good target? And he said it's pretty hard to, and that's where our risk is in doing that, is if, we might only get 2, and that's the risk of that. But that's what I'm saying. Over the life, it might be some years it might be 5, some might be 2, but he said 3% would over the long term. The problem is we don't know when the next recession is. However, we don't know when the next bull market or bear market.
So the scenario on the far right is really basically taking the money that you currently have, paying the debt service with it, and then taking that money and using it for other uses, right?
Exactly. So
Okay.
what that does is free up the general fund. You remember those red arrows I showed you, that we wouldn't have to transfer money to the debt service fund to pay that land.
Because that $5 million, if you leverage it with all these federal programs, if you said, okay, we're going to make a proposal to do something and we're going to pay 20% of it, if the federal government would pay 80% of it, you can leverage that $5 million to $100 million in investments in infrastructure or whatever you want to do, if we can get those grants from the federal government. There's a lot of those programs out there, and I think we're going to talk about some of the things that we want to look at here in the next section here. But I think that's something to seriously think about, because leveraging $5 million to get $100 million in investments is really a good deal. Now, would we do that much?
Sure.
I don't know. I'm not saying we would, but I'm just saying, hey, that's what it would do if you can get that.
My preference is the middle one, because then we don't get a shock to how much money we have to come up with. because that was our problem
Which
in the
middle
past.
one are you saying you might color it?
The yellow one.
The yellow. Okay. Sorry.
Because I mean, our problem in the past was our payments increased, and that would be what the situation we'd get into in the far right, was that all of a sudden our payments would jump, and
Balloon payments, yeah.
yeah.
Can you help me understand the savings column and how you calculated that and what it actually means? And specifically what I'm wondering there is that like a savings from a general fund perspective, or is it true savings based on money we're not paying in interest? What exactly does savings mean?
Budgetary savings. So savings from the general fund. So if you take the debt service minus what debt service you're gonna pay, I guess the savings would be essentially our payment from the proceeds fund, or where we're not transferring that money from the general. So
So we're not making $6 million
No.
by picking one of these options.
No, it
It's
would be less.
savings from the general fund.
Yes, plus any interest. So if we deposit 5 million, the 6 million would be the interest we gain that we wouldn't have had to transfer from that 5 million.
And what are current bond rates looking like?
I'm not. I would have to get back to you on that. We have probably going to go out to issue in September, so I haven't checked it. I don't want to give a false.
The feds are meeting currently, and they're looking at a 0.75% increase.
That's the
in fund in the money market, or in the federal funds rate.
Okay, so that's why I was asking
Yeah.
this, because I just don't know how that affects government bonds that are going to be issued, and these 2% bonds may be a bargain compared to what we can get in some other areas, and so that may be a really important factor in thinking about how we leverage these funds.
Yeah, and I think none of this would be any type of refi or any of that. We're staying with our original left side column. This is just more of a mechanism because we have none of these options would be a refinance at all.
So in the blue column,
These are payment schemes, what they are.
in
Yeah.
the blue column included, we will still pay the same total on the bonds. We're not refinancing those in any way.
Nope.
Okay.
It's-
Or reducing our
We're,
interest.
we're triggering the extraordinary redemption clause inside the refinance. The only problem we kind of had is, well, it's all sunk to the bottom, and we have current needs, and this might be another option for the council to consider. So I wanted to present it, and I can't get out of there without some kind of spreadsheet to show you guys.
So the orange one, the step progression, that gives you a lot of options that, based on interest rates, you can pay off more or less depending on what you're earning. Is that what I'm hearing?
So the orange, the only reason so year one we're saving $500,000 on the yellow. That's a pretty good chunk of change. So what the orange will allow us to do is slowly save money as we go into the future. So for 2023, we would save $200,000, and it wouldn't be as kind of the same philosophy of, well, if we went with the blue in 2031, we would be a windfall of $1 million, just in 1 year. Oh, there's $1 million more. So the orange allows us to slowly remove ourselves from this debt over the long term.
But that 3% assumption is real. Like in the yellow, the 3% assumption is not going to be a constant 3. So that's going to vary too.
Yes, but at 5 million, it's going to vary. It's going to vary, but we're not going to, until you get to the last 4 or 5 years, that's only when that type of scenario is probably going to play in of what our interest rate was. So that's the risk with that.
Or are you getting a long-term bond that covers all those years?
No, this would not be any new bond or any new. This would be simply interest on idle funds that we have held into a.
Right, but that interest would be very short-term.
Yes. State statute, a lot of CDs, and also KMIP. It's a Kansas Municipal investment pool. The state allowed it. That's where a lot of our idle funds is, because it's easy to use for me. You just give it to them and they structure a lot of our idle fund debt, and you can set it to longer terms. So we'll play around with it. A lot of this is new to me as well. So with the guidance of our financial advisor, we could develop some good strategies for long-term investment. And I'm not, if we want to provide more information, this is really, hey, this is an idea. I would like to discuss, how we want to set it up and different things, but for budgeting purposes, and that's where Council Member Welch, when he asked me, so what does the draft budget look without the land sale proceeds? It's kind of hard, because no matter what we do, we're going to save probably $100,000 if we do the redemption. So I kind of need some direction with the draft budget, because this affects the budget in 2023 as well. So this is kind of our strategy. There's a lot of unknowns. So for me to present a budget with a lot of unknowns, it's kind of hard to do.
Well, I wanted to wait until we had some idea how we were going to spend that money
Sure.
paying down the loan before we decided what else we could spend it on.
Sure.
What interest rate do we get on KMIP right now?
Oh boy. I'd have to get
Is
back
it close
you.
to the 3%, or
Well,
is
not
it like
right
half
now.
a percent?
We're coming out of historically low interest rates.
I'm concerned about that assumption, and the reason I'm concerned is because I think what I understand is with the extraordinary redemption option in the blue column, there will be real interest dollars saved there, and we actually know what that is because we know what our interest rate on the bonds is, and so
Yep.
I'm not sure there's any variability in the blue option. Is that fair?
That's fair. That's what we would save. That is the positive of that. That's guaranteed.
The others are
The
there's a lot of variability. A lot of things could happen. We may not save anything truly with those options, other than we may be able to leverage the funds to create some value for taxpayers sooner.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say we were going to make nothing over the next 14 years on a $5 million. So, I mean, maybe not.
But it might be 0.01%.
Yeah,
That's what
I
my
don't know
savings
about that,
account's
but-
paying.
Making those
You
kind
don't
of,
have 5 million either, I don't think.
making those kind of projections is just
They're putting in
almost a fool's
something
game.
much better than a savings account. I mean, over 14 years, that's a long period of time for an investment.
So on the first draft proposed budget, do you want me to go with just the regular redemption, and then if come back with maybe Adam can give a presentation on what interest rates would look like? But in my emails back and forth, they're very skittish of even projecting what's going to do at the end of the year, let alone 14 years out. So he knows the bond market, he knows the interest rate market a whole lot better than I. So it's for some guidance, and I know we're putting a lot of questions to you guys tonight, but this helps us plan.
Personally, I like doing the blue option for the budget because it seems like it's the most conservative, and that's typically how I think you prepare our budget, is with the
I
most
try.
conservative option. And so that would be really consistent with our typical methods for budgeting. And then should we discover a specific opportunity that would make us want to, leverage those funds for a different option, that we would adjust, and that would be kind of how I would think about it.
I personally would rather just stay with the original bonds and just keep it the way it is with that in the budget. And then if we find we don't have these opportunities that we think we might have, then we can consider these other options. But I personally don't want to step into them right now.
Okay.
That's an even more conservative option.
Yeah.
I agree, actually. Great point.
The only thing I will say is there's no going back once we hand over the 5 million, and we're paying bondholders off, and it's done deal. So just so we're all clear, I just want to make sure, and I think we are. But
I'm
There's two
not
different
clear
things.
now. We're talking about sticking to the original bond payments. Then what are we going to do with the 5 million?
no, the redemption, the blue. That's what they're suggesting.
Not me.
That was
No.
for budgeting, right? There's two
I
different
said original
conversations.
bonds.
So what do you want to do with the $5 million then?
I want to try to see if we can leverage it for
Okay.
these other projects.
Okay.
That's the one thing I don't want to do. I want this money to go towards paying the debt.
I want to leverage it. I want to do the best thing we can with the money for the city.
But I think your proposal from a budget perspective would be to leave it sitting where it's currently sitting and do nothing different than we've been doing historically,
Correct.
which is different than what I originally suggested on leverage on the blue column.
Okay.
And I think I actually prefer what the mayor suggested now that I've thought about it more, and leave it alone. Let's budget it like we've always budgeted it. Let's leave it sit there. Let's budget for the transfer. And then if we decide to go make an extraordinary payment, then let's do that. Or if we get convinced that there's a really good reason to not use it to pay off the land, then maybe we go do that. But that would be even more conservative, I think, than budgeting for the blue.
That's the reason I don't like that, is because some council will come along and spend all that money, and then you still have to raise taxes for the whole debt service.
It's for you guys to decide.
Well, I think that within the next year, we should have a better picture of
Sure.
how these funds are going to pan out. These the bill and the different government projects out there will pan out. I wish it would go faster than that. It seems like they passed this thing a long time ago, and they still don't even know for sure what all the rules are. And it's just like, it's really
Isn't there
frustrating, but that's
also
what's going
some
on.
limit on what we can spend the money in the land bank fund for?
Yeah, so then we get deep into policy. So you can reimburse the city for expenses incurred, which I imagine there's lots of way. I was talking to Kevin Cowan today about that particular option, and I can't speak with 100% certainty, but he wasn't concerned that I'm presenting this tonight. Now, if another opportunity presents itself that's not even land related, we might take a close look at that statute of how it's dictated of the land bank, how you can use that money. But he didn't seem, the expert that I know, didn't seem too concerned with anything I'm presenting tonight. We'll have to cross if there's other options when we get there.
Okay. Are we done, or do we have more questions to go on this topic?
So-
We've got a lot to do.
I'm confused about where we landed. I think I shared my opinion and Councilmember Welch shared his opinion. Is
Yeah.
that, I guess, I'm not sure. Ted, do you have the
I don't know
guidance
if
you
we
need?
Well,
Yeah, I
that's
mean,
why
we're
this
just,
was- That's why this is here. So we turn this in and say what our opinion is. All right?
I'm just going to plan as if we didn't have any money in the land bank. So, and then we'll to be determined, I guess, for 2023.
I think I agree with just to make this clear. I kind of agree with Justin that leaving that money so that there is some flexibility, whether we make a payment or there's some other need that we've evaluated and vetted and made sure that it makes sense. So I'm in agreement that I think we ought to kind of keep it as is.
I just wanted to be clear that there's two discussions going on here, one for budgeting and one for what we actually do with the money.
Yep.
So I'm okay with the conservative budget route too, but I don't agree that's what we should do with the money.
Okay.
Well, what do you think we should do with the money? How do you think?
The one that projects the best.
To be determined.
Well, what's best? An even payment or the most savings or?
Well, you have the opportunity to put that into your response to the survey. Okay.
Well,
Great.
I guess, this is going to be really helpful for Ty, but it's not going to be helpful for those watching at home. So that's why I wanted to make sure
Yeah.
everyone had an opportunity to share their thoughts.
Sure. That's fine.
Sure, I'll jump in since I haven't said anything. Why not? Under normal circumstances, I would be John. But if I'm understanding as a new council member this correctly, like you said, we can't suck the 5 million back if we go these other colored routes. So with money on the table and an inflationary environment, I think I'm more like Mayor and Councilmember Smith at this point.
Let me clarify that then. Are you saying if we put the $5 million in the fund at the state, we can't draw it back unless we tell them? Because I think that's what
we'd
I'm hearing.
we'd have complete control of the proceeds fund. So the only one that we would be, and I'm sorry if I wasn't clear, the blue one would be the only one that once we gave them the 5 million, we're getting little pieces of paper that say the bond's been paid, and so that they're paying off the bonds with the blue. But all other options would just be me creating another fund and that money sitting there earning interest, and then we'd have 2 transfers to make the payment, one from the general, one from this proceeds fund to make up that original 1.2 million.
So we could mix and match down the road if a year has extraordinary
We-
circumstances.
We could,
We don't know.
But- that's,
Okay. Thank you, Ted. Appreciate it. Mr. Lasher, bill opportunities.
Is everybody doing all right? What are we, halfway through?
Doesn't look like it.
So again, hopefully the notes that I left at your desk can help with this. I mean, we can certainly talk about every road if you want, but really, so to start us off is the bipartisan infrastructure bill was approved 2021, 973 billion. Again, that's what we were talking about. It's got to be spent sometime between 2022 and 2026. 7 federal agencies are overseeing it. So, DOT's getting some, Department of Health and Environment's getting, all these different groups, airports getting some. So it's all being spread out. But the dollars are being distributed through the state. So Kansas is receiving 3.8 billion. Eligible projects include water sewer upgrades, internet expansion, roads and bridges, electric power upgrades. So you can see what the ones in yellow are the ones that we'd probably be most interested in. The key, though, is package proposals is what they're saying. So the mayor and I met with Sedgwick County last week to talk about what a package proposal is, how it works, and they've actually hired 2 staff to start working with cities in Sedgwick County to package deals. So their idea and what their understanding is that those kind of dollars with a B, the state and the feds don't have enough people and probably not the desire to track where all that money's going. And it's much easier to have a grant go to Sedgwick County for, $1 billion and let Sedgwick County divide it all up, and then they track it. Then for Bel Aire to get $1 million and Keachai to get $500,000, and then all the towns and everything like that. So they're trying to put together kind of a way that this is going to work as far as packaging deals. So what I looked at is, okay, what road projects do we have? Because that was one of them. Where we share that with somebody else, because that's what the county was talking about. Do you have projects that you share? And these are pretty much all of the different projects, arterials for us. And I apologize, it's small, but there's a lot of them, and there's a lot of dollars there as well, depending on what you want to do. For example, Oliver to Woodlawn on 53rd Street, Oliver to Woodlawn. We already know that because Garver looked at that. You're looking at about $2.5 million to replace a 2-lane. If we wanted to do a 3-lane, like we're doing on Woodlawn, we're around $14 million. So there's a cost difference on the size and what it is we'd want to do. However, along that stretch, Bel Aire, Keachai, and Sedgwick County all have abut that. So that would be a good project. And then, Woodlawn I've got Woodlawn or 53rd Street, Woodlawn to Rock. You're probably looking at an overlay there. Bel Aire and Sedgwick County sharing that. 45th Street, we've talked about that one. If from Oliver to Woodlawn, again, the same deal. If it's a 2-lane, $2.5 million roughly. But if we wanted to do a 3-lane, do everything like we're doing on Woodlawn, we're talking about $14 million. The problem is that Bel Aire is on both sides, so it's really our street. But you look at some of the other ones like Oliver, 45th to K254. That whole thing needs some work. We could do a package deal of probably $1 million overlay, $3 million. Wichita, Keachai, and Bel Aire, and I think maybe even the county. I'm not sure about the county, but there's several cities that share in that road. Rock Road, one, again, as we're talking about growth, possibly a reconstruction, maybe to a 3-lane. Webb Road, that's our road. It's out to the east, but Mill and Overlay, partner with Wichita, Bel Aire, and that's not Keachai, that's Sedgwick County. Greenwich the same. So we've got a lot of roads that we share with others that I think we could probably try to get partnering in with Sedgwick County to get some of these bill dollars. So question for you is, what are your thoughts on these roads? Do you like them all? Do you like certain ones? We can certainly talk through each one if you like, however you want to do it, Mayor.
So what we would do with these is we would put these projects into the database that Sedgwick County is putting together. And then they could look at other cities and other projects out there and see, well, what can we put together as a package to submit to the feds. I don't know if they submitted directly. I think they've submitted to the state, which in turn submits it to the feds. So I mean, I see CCUA is on here as one option or one thing to think about. So one of the interesting things about that is I know that Derby is also looking at some sewer project as well. And the city of Wichita is getting ready to start their sewer project. They haven't started it yet. They're still doing their water project right now. Maybe the Sedgwick County puts all three of those into one package and then gets that one package funded. By the way, you noted there was EV charging stations. Bel Aire is not eligible to get those EV charging stations. They have to be on interstates, and we don't have any interstate here. So that was the Kansas rule. That is not necessarily the federal rule, but that's what Kansas rule is. So don't bring that up as a discussion. It ain't happening. Okay. Okay. So anyway, that's those are just some examples of things, and they said they would also look at, as I remember right, other grant funding opportunities that might be out there beyond just the bill, and make the recommendations to us if they thought that we should go and make a grant proposal for something. But I think the idea is the overlaying idea is that they would make the grant proposals because they would combine the projects together as a package.
Right.
Yep.
Mayor, that's my understanding too, just from what I've learned being in DC with ARTBA and in other instances. The formula dollars is what you're talking about here. The $3.8 billion is what's being allocated to Kansas and the DOT as a part of the formula for the Federal Highway Fund.
Right.
The grant monies, Federal Highway Administration is going to be administering that separately and independent. And it's kind of rare for them to do that, but they're going to be picking and choosing projects to fund in those grant programs. One of my suggestions would be, and this is really closely linked with Bel Aire, is the K254 Corridor Association has done a great job over the last several years presenting the need along the corridor to KDOT. And I would suggest that we really strongly consider high priority on any project that connects to 254 with the sole goal of trying to highlight that it is essentially already proven to be needed or is connected to an improvement that's already been studied. Because I think being able to present that in a grant or an application or a package and saying, hey, we've already taken the steps as a community to pay to study the corridor and advance the ball, I think will certainly bode well for our chances to get more of those dollars in a package and call it more of a corridor road improvement for safety and economics, whatever. And I think that could be both ways, both for the funds that are through formula with the state, but also for potential grant writing.
The city has to kick in a percentage on this, right?
Well, that's what we don't know.
We don't know, but what we do know is that when you do make a proposal and say, hey, we're willing to do 20%, you're better off getting that approved than if you say, well, we want $100 million, but we're not offering to support any of it ourselves, putting skin in the game ourselves. So we just know that. So.
Yep.
So are we proposing that we will do 20% on these projects, or what's the feeling there?
What I'm thinking is that we from what we were told is the county's gonna ask, what are your projects? And then let's see if we can put a package together. So what I'm thinking is we put all of these send all these to the county. And, you could make arguments because some of them do it hook to 254. Some of them have other cities in Sedgwick County. We'd highlight those things and then see if the county could put together something. And then my assumption is they'll come back to us and say, hey, we see this as these projects and the cost is 20 million. Could you put $2 million towards it? And then, council could say, yeah, we could do that. That one thing they did say is that it sounds like you can use federal money to match. So when we talk about ARPA funds, that's a concern is can you use federal money to get more federal money? And it sounds like you can. So that's again, when we talk about ARPA funds and what's the use, that might be the use for that is if they come back and say, you're going to need to come up with a couple million. We've already got 1.2.
So we think there's going to be give and take with the county to get these packages put together, and they'll kind of work with the member governments, Keachai or Sedgwick County, whoever, this is your piece of this package. You own 25% of it, and can you put 20% of your 25% in, kind of deal?
Yep.
Okay.
And the benefit for us is we don't have to try to, work with Keachai and Sedgwick County and Wichita to put projects together. They're going to do it and get all the parties together for certain projects. So it'll be easier for us.
Ty, do you know who the two people are? Did you the people that you mentioned earlier, the two that were hired, are those county employees or is that state level?
County employees.
Okay. Because I believe, from what I understand, Federal Highway Administration, I was telling this to Mayor too, is kind of recruiting, so to speak, because those grant monies that are going out, they're going to have people administrate those dollars. And so there's supposed to be a state representative that kind of helps pull all the parties together, so to speak. Similar to what you're talking about with the county level, it's supposed to be occurring at the state level to go across industries, so transportation, energy, all the different commerce departments. And I don't know that person's selected yet. We haven't heard.
Yeah.
So I'd be curious to know who the two people for the county are, just so we can.
Yeah, from what Ted talked about and you all know about the current market for employees, positions. They had two people hire and they both took something else and left. And so now they're hiring two more people. So I don't even know they know who they are.
I
yet.
think Valerie was one of them.
Okay.
But they don't, he didn't tell us the name of the other one.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
So.
And then as the mayor said, as far as sewer water improvements, utility improvements, we've got the 11 million we proposed in that base grant, which we didn't get. Not sure that's something we can throw out there and see if there's any support for that or not. It's really just a Bel Aire project, so I'm not sure we could get it. But the CCUA would certainly be one with Park City. That's a good possibility, I think. Now the question is, can anybody else in the county support it? I don't know.
So I do think that, and we've kind of talked about this before, we need to put our story together as to why these are good projects that we need to do. I mean, I wouldn't want to let the county try to put that together. I mean, they may have something to add to it that would be valuable, but I don't think they would know the level of detail that we would know about these projects. Like 45th Street has a 12-year school on there, along there. Okay. But there's no sidewalk on that north side of that street, so there's things like that. That's a story to tell about each one of these projects that we would need to do as part of what we give to the county.
But we don't have to prioritize these. We're going to submit them all.
That was my thought, unless you all say, don't throw this one in or.
Well, I think the only reason you might have to prioritize them is it might depend on how much work we think that narrative is to put the story together and how long we have to get this ready. We may want to prioritize the order that we put the narrative together so that we make sure the most important
So-
ones get in.
So I think some of these are duplicates because they're the same road. It's just that one's a 2-lane proposal,
Yeah.
one's a 3-lane proposal. So I would say, okay, let's decide which one we're going to propose. Let's not propose both, and stay with that. And then my personal opinion, and I'm willing to help with this, is I hope we have all this in the county's hands within the month. I don't know if that's doable, but that's just my personal thought on it.
And that's the struggle, is we don't know, what it is narrative they're expecting. Are they expecting a paragraph? Because I think the mayor asks, well, what do you want us to do? And their answer was, well, we're not sure yet.
Yeah. And so I made a proposal to them that we put an addendum and an attachment to it.
Yep.
And they said, oh, okay, that would be fine.
Yeah.
So I think we just go and do that.
So
And
we're not sure if it's
we
a
might have to redo some
paragraph
things,
or a
but we gotta get-
page or
Yeah.
what.
And I don't remember who it was we heard from, whether it was MKEC or Garver, but we heard from somebody recently that they had a dedicated capability, for hire that could help with some of this
Grant
type
writing.
of grant writing.
Mhm.
I had proposed that we maybe even do that to make sure that we can get it all written up in time
Make it look really good.
and make it look really compelling. Give us our best shot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In this particular scenario with what we're doing with the county, I don't think we need to do the grant writing. And I think it's premature to do the grant writing because they're going to write the grants and maybe have our inputs. But you're right. If we need to write the grant, I agree with you 100%. We need to.
Well, even just the
That would
narrative
help.
component of that, I think they indicated they had capability around. So maybe not the full on grant proposal, but somebody to help us with the narratives might be appropriate.
Yeah, Justin, I would agree because I think it goes back to if we can show we're ahead of the game and we're proactive and we have more information than our counterparts in the county,
Mhm.
I think it's going to show well. Like if we just feed them what they need to see. I mean, I know we don't know what they need to see, but it really is kind of a beauty contest, maybe, because of the amount of people we're going to be competing with in the county. Like, is it worth looking like we're progressive and we're really interested in getting these projects built versus sitting back and waiting for them to tell us how to do it?
Okay. That's fair.
Okay.
So you just need some scoring on these? Is that what you need?
Yeah. Just
Okay.
some notes, scoring thoughts, however.
I mean, would it be helpful to just talk about the general preference for the 2-lane options versus the 3-lane options? I feel like we could narrow that down to about half with a quick discussion on that.
I agree.
Yeah, we could do that. So let's just start with the 53rd on Oliver to Woodlawn. I'm going to personally favor the 2-lane option because we've got that design, 90% complete?
For what street was that, Mayor?
53rd Street from Oliver to Woodlawn.
Uh,
That's design's 90%?
Yep.
Okay.
For 2-lane. Yep.
For a 2-lane, we haven't looked at a 3-lane on it.
Nope.
So,
Nope.
So I'm that's my vote anyway.
Without kind of knowing the city's more or less master plan on that corner at 53rd and Oliver, I would tend to agree. It looks like a lot of residential's occurring along the south side. So I wouldn't see the need, at least at this point or in the near future, for it to be more than 2 lanes.
Right.
So I would probably just say let's just plan on submitting as a 2-lane.
53rd Woodlawn to Rock, that's just an overlay of the existing road, right? With another 3-inch lip of asphalt.
Right.
That's really what that is. Yeah. So there's no other option on that one. It's just something to do, right?
Ty, on that one, was that one selected by Ann or the PEC study that was done? Like some of these, like this list, where did it come from? I'm just kind of curious.
Basically,
Sorry,
that
I didn't
was
mean to-
yeah, that was basically Ann and I. PEC didn't look at the major ones.
Okay.
When the one that the mayor just mentioned, it's got a great base, and to save cost in doing that, we just put a 2-inch on it, and the intent was always to put another 3 on there.
Sounds good.
45th Street, Oliver to Woodlawn. That's a thorn in everybody's side. That one is currently on the WAMPO tip for 2026 with no funding. So at 3-lane at 14 million, just so you know where it is. But because it has no funding, I'm thinking we ought to act like we're not going to get any money out of WAPO on that, especially as 2026 is even with that first consideration. So that's kind of, I'm thinking we should just, my personal view is to go with the 3-lane like we have conceptualized with WAPO. There's been no design work on that.
Yeah, with Sunrise there, I mean,
Yeah.
3-lane is kind of almost a must.
There's lots of entries and exits on that road.
Oh,
A
yeah.
turn lane is needed.
Yeah, at least a turn lane there at Sunrise, if nothing more.
Hey,
But
and
there's so many other things along there. It's a 3-lane because
Yeah,
there's
there's
so
so
many.
many
there's
neighborhood
there's the
entrances.
church, there's that crosswalk light, Sunrise,
There's a
ditch.
lot of things going on there. So
the
but-
elevation change with the ditches. I would agree 3 lanes.
Which I wonder if we're going to end up in that same spot, honestly, with 53rd eventually as well, with lots of neighborhood entrances and exits. I'm kind of wondering if we shouldn't have a general preference for the 3-lane if we're going to be targeting 20% of the cost that we would bear. I think that's why we
Kind of think
picked
long-term.
2-lane for 53rd Street, is because we knew there was no way we could afford a $14 million project, and we didn't expect it to be a WAMPO thing. But if we're targeting vision,
And Homestead is going in the southeast corner of 53rd and Oliver, is that right?
That's correct. But it will not affect 53rd because all the entrances up to all
Are going to be on Oliver. Okay.
there are no access to Homestead on 53rd.
Okay.
I mean, it'll have impact on traffic, but it won't have impact on turns.
Turning. Okay.
my personal preference would be that we would submit the 3-lane version on all of these.
Yeah, but then if you get turned down, you don't do the 2-lane either. Or are you saying submit both?
Are these kind of questions that Garver can advise us on if they help us write the narrative? Not these are just decisions we have to make.
I mean,
Yeah.
I think they will tell you. I mean, it's going to come down to the dollars, and I'm kind of leaning towards you, Justin. We're talking big dollars here, and if we can leverage it, then I think we would want to invest at a higher level because we don't know what's going to happen in 10 or 15 years. This is a bigger investment, so maybe it is worth submitting all as 3 just to be consistent.
But I was thinking, there's no penalty in shooting for the moon
Right.
in terms of being in the running for this money. Okay.
Well, but except for one thing, you have a much better, stronger position on 53rd, Oliver to Woodlawn because you've already done design work.
That's true.
Oh.
Okay.
Yeah,
And
if you're
if you go
95%.
with 3-lane, you've not done design work for a 3-lane. And that's a completely different design because there's
Utility relocated,
the roadbed isn't
drainage.
there. Okay.
Yep.
So, but I think you should stay with the 2-lane there simply because you've already done the
Design.
design work
Okay.
on that
I
one.
think that's a good note.
I'm okay with the 3-lane on 45th. I think that's appropriate. 45th Woodlawn to Rock, I think, yeah, Mill and Overlay is probably fine with that. There's a lot of traffic on there right now, but I think it's because of Woodlawn. I don't think it's because of anything else.
Yeah.
I do think that, and of course, this is just another discussion. We need to get a turn lane in there, but it's not worth a 3-lane. It's just, there needs to be a turn lane there. It's at one of those areas. But that's another deal.
Turn lane where? Probably
Probably at Rushwood and Catholic Care right there where they're right together. Because there's,
That's almost wide enough. It wouldn't take much to put a
Oh,
turn
yeah.
lane in.
yeah, I know it's almost wide enough now. It's probably not a big deal, but it's like I said, it's not something to get in big discussion about right now anyway. We're just talking concepts right here.
And if we were doing a 2-lane, we could plan the turn lane right there.
Yep. Oliver 45th to K254, just the mill and overlay of the entire, would you do 45th or would you go to 37th on Oliver?
Yeah, probably 37th.
I would say 37th, clear to 254. And that's probably going to raise your price a little bit, but just might,
Add another million anyway.
yeah, at least another million. But I would do that. Woodlawn 45th to K254. Yeah, I think we need at least to do that. If I've had citizens say, why did we not go all the way up there with that Woodlawn project. I've had that question several times, and I said, well, that wasn't what was proposed, and it's a long, long road to get that kind of funding. So we might want to think about throwing that out there as well.
How much do we have to be able to turn down? If we get 3 or 4 of these projects, we're not going to be able to afford all of them.
Well, like I
That's
said,
a
$100 million
good
at
question.
5 million leverage.
Yep, good question.
So that's, yeah, but you're right. You can't get them all.
That would be a beautiful day if they came back and said, we want to do 10 of these projects, and then we have to decide,
Yeah,
we can't do all 10.
that's a nice problem to have.
Right. Let's try to get,
How do we get them all
let's
done?
try to get there. Yeah.
As
But I
long-
agree
As long as
that-
we have that option to turn them down.
Right. So,
I kind of tend to agree though, the 45th to at least 53rd or to K254 rather than a mill and overlay on Woodlawn is considering whether or not to submit that as a full 3-lane. And the reason why I say that is the school, Isley, obviously the development that's occurring on 53rd already
you got 2
west.
schools there. You got Catholic Resurrections
I-
there as well.
Kind of think that maybe that's worth submitting a little bit bigger of a project, but
Well, and then it goes to an interchange.
Yep. So, yeah, I think
Woodlawn
that-
is a current overpass or a current interchange. So that's a good point. That's another strong point.
Mhm. So rebuild. Okay. Then we have Rock, 45th to 53rd, complete restriction with 3-lane. Is there really a need for 3-lane in there?
The only reason that we would need it and just for that area is if in fact we do get the corner developed with some commercial and retail.
Need some left turn lane
The
there.
developers that always look at that say, what are you going to do with Rock? So,
Yeah,
and you wouldn't, yeah.
you'll have it on the other end as well. So, yeah, and probably if you're doing that, you need to go back to the railroad track and do it all the way from the railroad track.
Oh, yeah.
Mayor, the other thing to consider on Rock is Northeast Magnet High School, and also what was K254's proposal? Was that an overpass?
Overpass.
So that's another thing we can tie again to.
Yeah, it's
They're
an
not putting an
underpass.
overpass on
There was
Rock,
no
are they?
interchange.
Yeah, I can't remember exactly, but I know Webb, Greenwich, and Rock were all identified as potential improvements. So that's another thing we can attach to. Hey, there's a study to do an interchange or an overpass, and we can connect to that as an improvement.
Right.
Add, like, you're not just building our project; you're building our project to connect to this project. This
Yeah,
new
it's a
improvement.
connector. Yeah. And
That's
that-
good.
those are important in that whole bill
I think
perception is what are the
Exactly.
connectors? What are the, there
feeder
was another
roads.
term they used and I can't remember what it was.
It's off system versus on system.
Yeah, off system.
Yeah.
That was it. Yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
Thank you.
I think that's a big story to the narrative piece of all these projects. And I think tying it to those 254 improvements would be huge for both
Oh, yeah.
us and for KDOT
Mm-hmm.
to get those done too.
I think Rock Road's going to be a really tough sell. We just now got enough traffic to put a stoplight in. We're not going to be able to justify a 3-lane road.
We have so much traffic that we had to put a stoplight in.
Exactly.
There you go.
Even at that, it's still not enough
Stop
traffic.
sign.
I don't
Okay.
think you're going to be able to sell that one.
I think you just have to point to KDOT's study of potentially putting in an overpass or interchange and call it, that's really
And that
so-
might be something that would be more appropriate to be on here is to do some interchange work in the side roads that we were talking about along 254.
Frontage roads.
If we wanted to close Rock and move all the traffic over to Webb.
Well, I think, and of course, this depends on whether the study comes out, but I think the concept today is to do an underpass under the road with rock so that there's access to Keachai side of the north side of Rock, but it wouldn't just close it off. I think it'd be fine to close it off and divert the traffic to Woodlawn or Webb, but that wasn't the concept that that K250 or corridor people in KDOT are talking about right now. Now that could all change with their study, because their study is going to get the input of the citizens in the communities. So
Right.
we'll see how that goes.
It's
Okay.
also one of those things that
On that.
I mean, I agree with John. Like maybe the frontage road for Rock Road that we own that property. And I think, was it a council meeting or two before, a developer rezoned the property that abuts that frontage road. I mean, it's one of those things where if we built a frontage road and we could almost stipulate how we want that to look, like, or at least start talking about it. Like, hey, as a community, we want it to look this way. And that's going to be a part of their study, is us weighing in on that.
Well, and we can call the land contribution our percentage input.
Yep.
We wouldn't have to come up with real dollars.
Right.
Yeah,
Yep.
that's true.
That's right.
Okay. So Rock Road, 53rd Street to K254 mill and overlay. I'm okay with that, I think, because others think. Webb Road, 45th to K254 mill and overlay, $5 million because it's a bigger road and it probably needs a little more care.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And then Greenwich, 45th to K254. Yeah, that one's another one just like Rock that they're talking about, maybe doing an underpass type of thing. So, but I'm good with that idea, the concept.
Hadn't part of that recently been redone? Or am I alluding?
We did some maintenance, some
Crack
crack
re-
repairs, and we did a slurry seal and striping.
Or maybe it's the slurry seal then. I know it looked newer.
Yeah, it's been
Yeah, I think we did a slurry seal.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, so Sunflower Commerce,
I'm
well, we
trying
already
to-
talked about
CCUA.
CCUA. And
I just want to make one comment on CCUA. I like the idea
Mhm.
of that. The concern that I have is, we've just started talking about annexing, and I think there's another annex thing coming. It seems like our growth is headed to the east, further and further away from
Mhm.
where the CCUA plant is. I'm a little bit concerned about our ability to leverage the CCUA plant as we get further and further away. So I've talked with Ty about this. I think we need to get some information on if we're going to grow to the east based on the topography and the lines that are there, how practical is it to keep growing capacity that goes to the current CCUA location?
yeah,
I think we might get some more downhill flow instead of pumps.
So
I mean, it's
I think that's a real risk for us.
It's an idea.
yeah, I understand what you're saying, but in this particular scenario, this is, again, a design that's in place. It's ready to go. It's shovel ready. And you could do this at little cost to Bel Air if it's appropriately done, if we get the right grant. And it would be a minimal cost to Bel Air and be a good benefit. It may not be enough. You may be right. We may need to look at going beyond and going east as well. I just don't know that we're ready to have that discussion today.
I just don't want to pay for capacity that we can never use, even
Yeah.
if it's just a little bit. If we can't ever use it, it's a waste of our money.
Yeah. I
And
just don't.
this is one of the difficult things because I think I'd heard, and I might be wrong on this, but the capacity, what's the current capacity for sewage at that plant? I feel like we still have quite a bit of room to grow into it, but I think the upgrade is both expanding and also improving the treatment
Yeah.
process. So it's kind of twofold, but
It is, but
I just wanted to
the
clarify that.
projections were that we had, this was a year ago, we had 5 years before we needed this expansion. Now that's 4. And they're throwing some numbers at us right now that make it look like it's a little more imminent, but we don't trust the numbers yet because it's too erratic.
Yeah.
They're not consistent, and I don't know. So
Well-
we're still trying to run through that and
Yeah.
get a better understanding of what those numbers mean.
There's a lot to that question and a lot to dive into of CCUA,
Right,
and
right.
I don't want to turn this into a whole
Nope,
CCUA discussion,
can't
but
have that.
I wanted to put a footnote out there as just something to think about.
Yeah, I think it's worth thinking about. Oh, okay. Sunflower Commerce Park, water and sewer upgrades, $11 million. I don't really know much about that. Tell us what you're thinking there.
Well, it was just, we just put that together, and basically that would serve all of these areas for water and sewer. So this is Webb Road and this is Greenwich, and you're looking at probably 600 acres or so that opens up for industrial. The economic development piece of it is that typically what we do is charge special assessments to put those in. Well, when we're competing with companies, they don't like taxes, they don't like special assessments and all those things. So if we could get that money put in using federal dollars, which was the goal of that base grant that the state had through the Spark Committee, then that's an economic benefit because we can now offer that land with no special assessments.
We don't currently own that land, though.
We do not own that land.
That land is all privately owned, but it is all within the city limits of Bel Air.
Right.
Okay, so
Yes.
eventually we'll probably end up having to do something anyway. So.
Yep.
Okay, I kind of understand the concept. I would say if that one was one we would do, I'd want to put no money into it. I want them to pay 100% of it. That's my view.
Gotcha. Yep.
But it'd be a good thing to have.
What-
Right?
Ty, so what you're saying is essentially that the city pre-build pad-ready sites, is that kind of like, so essentially we'd have to own the land to even do that, and then we'd have to pay for water and sewer upgrades so that they can basically just start construction. They'd have utilities already. Is that kind of what that's
all we
for?
would do is put in the water and sewer mains along the
Got it.
streets basically in the right of ways. And the benefit is that, when a company comes in, they're talking to the landowner to try to get the best price they can on the land. But then they also come to the city about, well, what other incentives can you offer us? Well, one is, we could say one incentive is, well, there's no special assessments and utilities are at the site. Now, like the mayor said, if we have to match that, that's a good question is should that say we have to match $1 million? Do we then go to the landowners and say, hey, will you sign a petition to special assess that $1 million? And in return, you get $11 million investment. That's a good
Nice-
question. I think.
Nice value to them.
Yep.
Yes.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
big value to them.
So somewhat related to that, and I don't want to get down to diversions of it, but City of Wichita just today reduced their CIP at K96 and Greenwich from a 22-year project to 7 years, and they're no longer going to charge that 1% sales tax immediately. I think it's immediately, right? They've been at it for 7 years, and they've already paid off all their infrastructure off of that. So I know some of the big picture thinking is that all that's going to head north towards us. So all that development. So this is prime for that kind of that area. The big picture is maybe 10, 15 years down the road. I don't know how long that takes, but anyway. So that's what the thinking is. Okay. Any other projects we want to throw into the bill? It's already 10 o'clock and we still have a couple items to talk about. So let's move on to TIF policy if we're ready to.
Do you want to keep going? We've got TIF and lot across from City Hall. Do you want to continue talking about those, or do you want to wind it down and push them to the next workshop? What would you like to do?
What's the feeling of the council? How much time are we talking to do these?
Well, the TIF policy is probably 15 minutes to 20 minutes. Lot across from City Hall. That's your discussion. So however long you want to talk.
That one might need its own meeting.
I'm sorry?
I said I would suggest that we do the TIF policy and then have a separate special meeting or workshop, whatever we want to do for the City Hall lot, because I could see that turning into a lot bigger discussion. That's just my opinion.
I'd be fine with ending here at 10 o'clock.
I think I'm good with ending here too. The only question is how urgent is the TIF policy? Because you're talking about that in relationship to selling a lot.
Well, I mean, they are kind of tied together because we have a party that's looking at the lot across from City Hall to utilize the TIF. So, I guess the question that needs to be answered is what are we doing with the lot across from City Hall? Are we going to sell it? Are we not? Are we interested in using a TIF over there? And if we are, then what's the policy going to look like? So
We need
they're
to do
kind of
those topics
tied
together.
Yeah, they need to be done together. So
So then that back to the question of urgency, should we schedule a second workshop this month?
Let's see. I would feel comfortable pushing it to July. And the reason being is because the developer is still doing his due diligence, putting his team together, working on a pro forma through, and he said he was going to take a month to do that. So I don't know that I'll hear anything from him.
Okay,
Isn't July budget month?
I was gonna say,
Yeah,
we're
and
gonna
then,
hear
so the
from
next
Ted again
question
in
is
July.
how much is Ted? How long is Ted going to take?
And what about these other issues for future dates?
So the future dates issue that'll take 10 minutes.
We have an extra Tuesday in June,
I'm out of town.
the 28th.
If you can workshop without me, but I'm out of town that week. So,
The July workshop, I'll be on vacation, so
okay, so.
Well, if we do it on the 28th, I need to schedule it later than 6:30. I can do 7, I believe. And there's something down here about a council retreat on your survey.
Yeah, so that's under future dates. I'm going to talk about that real quick.
Well, should we hit the future dates and then come back? I'd really like to get done by 10. It's getting late.
Okay.
We're not going to make it clearly because it's after now. but-
What's our council meeting agenda? How full is it looking for next week? Do we have, is it a short one or we could?
That's a good question. At this point, out of what we talked about today,
5 items on it from last week, right? Still.
yeah, we do have some things from last week. Yeah.
But what do you have to add?
Well, there wasn't much.
Okay.
More development stuff. Yeah. Annex.
Okay. We might be able to do it next week. Next
Put
week.
extra items on the agenda. Just put these items on our council meeting agenda. Talk about them in our meeting or have a special workshop. It probably didn't matter.
For no decision, are you saying? Like, just put them as discussion points?
Yeah.
Yeah, just add them as discussion points to
Okay.
the city council agenda. How's that work?
Yeah. And if we
Okay,
got
let's do
time,
that.
good. If we don't, good.
Only for
Okay.
discussion.
That's a good plan.
Okay.
So council orientation, what I'm proposing is take a Saturday in July and come in and do council orientation. We've got basically 3 new council members. Greg's been here since November. We got Tyler, we got Emily. But we've done this in the past. I think John hasn't attended one, but Jim and Justin have. And really what we do is we take a morning, start about 8:30. We're done usually by 1. And what we're going to do is we would go through introductions. You'd meet staff, get to know a little bit about each other, what your roles are as a council member, what the mayor's role, my role, staff. We talk about city services, what each department does. Jackie would have some legal issues, COMA, Kansas Open Meeting Act, HORA, executive sessions, quorums, meetings, all that kind of stuff. She's got about an hour. Then we talk a little bit about what you see as Bel Aire's vision, what you have as a vision for Bel Aire. But more importantly, That should be 2023 goals. What do you want to accomplish short term? Maybe some goals or things that you think are important, not just in the budget process, because you'll talk with Ted about that during the budget, but maybe there's some things that you want us to be working on as staff for the next month or the next year. So is that something everybody interested in? Really learning about the city, learning about each other, what your roles are? So what I looked at is, okay, so here's some dates that are Saturdays that are open. This one is the 4th of July weekend, so might be a good weekend to be traveling or doing something. This weekend I'm on vacation, but the rest of them, we could, if any of those would work for anybody.
I'm on vacation the 16th and 23rd, but I can do the 30th.
Okay.
Me too. 16th and 23rd, I'm gone on vacation, so 30th is the only day that I could attend.
It's the only day I can't attend.
That's the one you can't do.
Sounds about normal.
So we could go into August as well. And
Look at
the only
August.
reason, this one I'm on vacation, but the other days we're open.
I'm open to the 13th or the 20th.
The 20th doesn't work for me.
It looks like either one's good for me. 13th would be fine.
13th is best for me. 20th is okay for me, but the 27th is not really a good one. I can make it, but it's not a good one.
27th is not good for me either.
Well, it sounds like the 13th works for everybody. Okay, so we'll put that together. Like I said, we'll have some breakfast. You'll get to meet everybody, learn a little bit about all the departments, talk about some goals, get to know each other, and we'll be done by lunch, or we'll have a working lunch and be out by 1, something like that.
Last time we did this, I think you brought somebody in and there was a portion of it that was more academic focused on kind of role of government and different things. I particularly didn't find that portion of it as valuable. Like, it'd be my recommendation to limit that part of the discussion if that's something that you guys are thinking about. And I liked the items that you had up there.
Councilmember Smith, I'm going to do it.
Okay.
Because of exactly that. In the past, we've hired WSU, things like that. And the struggle that we run into is it's pretty high level. It's kind of academic. And, we really want to talk about what it is that your roles are, what our roles. We know more about the city than typically bringing somebody else in. They charge. And so I'm going to try it this year, and you can tell me whether I do a good job or not, but I'm going to take everything that I wish they would have done and put them in a retreat for you. So hopefully it'll be really valuable. It's my goal. Okay. And then I'll put the rest of the items on the agenda for talking points.
Okay. Anything else we need to talk about tonight? All right. We are adjourned. Everybody have a good week, and we'll see you next Tuesday.